Yes, I love this land. It takes my breath away.
Welcome to Texas 10. I'm Melissa.
And I'm Steve. And for the last 5 years, we've traveled around Texas finding interesting and fun things.
You know, today I want to talk about one of my favorites.
Which is?
Van Horn, Texas, which is?
The county seat of Culberson County, which is a large county that is sort of right where we meet New Mexico. If you can sort of envision the little L right there, that's where Culberson County is.
And it has the highest peak in Texas.
Really?
It really does.
Well, I'm not surprised by that, because what did we do?
I want y'all to know, I did it. I climbed Guadalupe Mountain.
Guadalupe Mountain is the highest point in Texas. It's somewhere over 8,000 feet. So all you Coloradans would laugh at that, but it's 8,000 pretty tough feet.
Steve told me it was the easiest climb that we could possibly do. And I'm going to. You did.
Okay.
And I will tell you, it's one of the hardest things I did, but one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
Right. So it's sort of a bucket list item that we wanted to go to the highest place in Texas, and there's only one, and it's actually in a national park. It's Guadalupe Mountain National Park, and it is remote.
You can't even really, there's no hotels around. I mean, you could camp. And it's not just the mountain, too. There's other wonderful hiking. We hiked to this beautiful little cabin, which was really gorgeous.
Right. So what Melissa's saying is that there is sort of a variety of hiking options. And if you don't feel up to getting to the top of Guadalupe Mountain, you can do a variety of things. And it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. But
it's really spectacular.
Right. And so, but it is remote. Again, I'm gonna emphasize that. It is remote.
And so we stayed in Van Horn, and we drove, it was 50 miles?
It's just a little over 50 miles from Van Horn to Guadalupe Mountain. Now, you could stay in New Mexico. This park buttresses Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, and Carlsbad, New Mexico has got some hotels and whatnot. But then you're not in Texas.
We did not do that.
Right.
We stayed in Van Horn, and it's really one of my favorite little towns. I really loved it.
So Van Horn is on Interstate 10, and it's a really good study. We love the interstate system in the United States because it allows us to get places quick, sort of multi-day travel and whatnot. That's all great. But when they ran Interstate 10 through the area of Van Horn, and a lot of towns like this, it really impacted the towns that were not exactly on the interstate. So it's only half a mile off the interstate, but a lot of people don't stop in Van Horn anymore when they used to, and that's a sad thing.
Well, it has a beautiful hotel. It was built by the same people who built the Paisano Hotel in Marfa, and this one is El Capitan?
El Capitan. Now,
trying to remember.
Right. So El Capitan calls back to the Guadalupe Mountains. The peak that sits right under Guadalupe Peak is El Capitan. There's other famous El Capitans in the world. This is Texas's version, and it's a very sheer, imposing sort of looking thing. It's beautiful, actually. If you catch it in the right light, it's pretty awesome.
And really, the hotel was a beautiful place to stay. You kind of felt like you were stepping back in time.
No question. Henry Trost, who's a famous architect, he did the El Capitan and the Paisano in Marfa, and actually there were two others. They were called Gateway Hotels. Those two are the only two that are left. But it is a higher end hotel. It was reasonably priced, but you get nice linens. It's got a really calm courtyard with a fountain out there.
A wonderful restaurant.
Right, and the restaurant is great, which after a day on Guadalupe Mountain, that chicken fried steak was earned that time.
It was earned.
And it was really good.
It was.
Right, and so that was part of Van Horn. One of the interesting things, though, was getting from Guadalupe Peak to Van Horn. You take a highway, state highway, straight through 50 miles. I believe we saw 5 cars in those 50 miles.
You know, I always thought you could have driven to, you know, however fast your car could go, and
Right.
it's just straight. And it's really interesting because you pass this ranch that is owned by Jeff Bezos.
On the right is his personal ranch, and on the left is Blue Origins, the headquarters of Blue Origins, his space company. And so Jeff Bezos actually has a Texas background. He is a Texan, although he moved away quite some time ago. But he owns a ton of land.
Well, you know, it's so interesting. You hear and you saw the launch, and to drive by and to know that's where they launch these rockets is really pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, too, when you're in Van Horn, you can sort of tell who the out-of-town engineers are and whatnot, and they're flying out from wherever their engineering backgrounds are, and I think they spend a couple of weeks there, and then they go back. It's sort of interesting to think about this little town in Texas hosting that sort of technology, that sort of brain power, and just seeing two worlds collide, really.
So we had a great time climbing the mountain, but we also enjoyed just playing in the town. One of the things Steve loves is high school football stadiums. And wherever we're in a little town, we have to check it out. And so it was a school day, and we drove in, and Steve's got to get out and get into the stadium. And all of a sudden, someone drives up and says, "Excuse me, do you have permission to be here?" Do you remember that?
I do remember that, and that somebody happened to be the principal of the school. Let me back up a little bit. I love high school football stadiums because I know a certain twirler who used to twirl on Friday nights in the high school football stadium. But I was really impressed with this one. I wanted to see it because I figured the setting for it would be great, because you have the mountains in the background. You have the sort of cool mountain air. We were there on spring break. And so I just figured it would be, the background would be good. But once we broke the ice with the principal, which Melissa did more ice breaking than I did.
You know, I talked to him. He was really such a nice person, and then took us on a tour, and you would not believe the facilities that they were building at this little rural high school.
It was awesome. We're big supporters of the idea that high schools can bind a community together, and it was very obvious in Van Horn that that is what was going on there. And he was so proud. I remember it was track season. I remember him talking about they had a state-level track athlete. I believe he was a high jumper that was getting all sorts of college interest and that sort of stuff. And the track team was out getting ready to practice, and it was just sort of Norman Rockwell-ish.
It really was. Well, there's no better beautiful place to have a Friday Night Lights atmosphere than Van Horn, Texas.
I would go back to Van Horn just for a Friday night game.
I would
be
too.
Great. And so the other thing that was interesting, talking about football, as I mentioned, it was just off I-10, and there's a restaurant there named Chewy's. Now there's a chain of Chewy's in Texas that's not that Chewy's.
It's not that Chewy's, but it is really good.
Right. But the interesting thing, well, first we walked in, and there was a Mike Singletary jersey on the wall, who's a Baylor legend, and so we were happy about that. But then we turned around, and there was
a shrine.
It was a shrine to John Madden, the former Raiders coach and then famous football announcer.
Well, you know, I don't know if you all know this, but we're a big sports fan. He was afraid of flying, so he had a bus, and he went cross country to whatever game he was covering.
Right. And one time he was going to cover, I think it was probably the Oilers before the Texans. And he comes from Los Angeles. He's going to be on Highway 10. They're going through Van Horn. John was hungry. They found out about Chewy's restaurant. They stopped, and he loved it. And every time he came across Highway 10 in the Madden Cruiser, they would stop at Chewy's in Van Horn, Texas, to get some great Mexican food.
And so the owner has pictures, and it really is. They have the table he sat at. It was really, really pretty fun.
Right. So Van Horn, I'm just going to have to wrap it up here because our 10 minutes is almost up. But the Guadalupe Peak. Climb it if you can. It's awesome. It was a great experience. And then the town itself, El Capitan, Chewies, and there's a lot of other great things to see. You can learn more about it at our website, texas10.com. So go there, follow us on social media, give us a like, a share, all of those things. We really appreciate your time. We'll be back soon with more stories about Texas.
Join us. Bye.
About you, and I love this land. Oh, it takes my breath away. From the Palo Duro to the Gulf Coast plain, from the heart of the hill country to the piney wood shade, I love this land. It takes my breath away.